Thank you, everybody, and it's a real honour to stand up here on the stage this morning and be a part of the speakers that we've had. What a feast we've had, new concepts, new ideas, new knowledge, and it's great to be a part of that. I'm Robert Hinrichsen. I'm one of the founding directors of CalFresh. Day to day now, I've taken a role in agriculture, which is a good fit for me, and so I've come to talk today about some of our soil health journey. Jack, I really appreciated the passion that you spoke about, the problems, we could hear it in your voice, the problems that agriculture faces, not only in California but around the world, and some of the well-meaning but completely unworkable regulation that pretty well turns us into criminals every time we get out of bed. And I think we've got a little bit to learn about being effective lobbyists in our country, and might take a leaf out of your book, starting in the capital, and basing people there. Certainly a good idea, and having well-voiced and well-versed growers go up there and plead their case. I'm sure that's effective. I'll put up with any amount of regulation, but we just got to stop selling carrots for $1 a kilo. That's essentially it. And so I guess a part of that, controlling costs, birthed out of that has been our soil health program, and I've called it the less is more philosophies of farming, and that's what I'd like to talk about today. I've titled this talk 40,000 kilometres and 5 cows, and that's a nice picture of cows. We also raise a bit of beef at CalFresh as well. So here we go. Are you ready for this? 40,000 kilometres and 5 cows. In the early 1900s, there was a professor of soil science at the University of Missouri called Dr. William Albrecht. And Dr. Albrecht worked in the dairy industry, and he noticed that all of the young calves in the area had scours or had diarrhoea. But if they supplemented their diets with calcium and magnesium, they stopped. So he surmised that somehow the local soils had been mined out of these essential elements to the detriment of bovine health. He teamed up with a collaborator called John Cook, who had lost an 11-year-old son to what amounted to little more than malnutrition, to study this phenomenon of the outcomes of healthy soils. And so began a lifelong obsession with soil health and sustainable quality production. In a famous quote, Dr. Albrecht said that soil is a creative material of most of the basic needs of life, that all of creation begins with a handful of dust. Albrecht's career was often punctuated with notoriety, particularly at the University of Missouri, where this soil scientist dared to enter the spectrum of human health. I mean, my God, we have buildings full of doctors and scientists called the Faculty of Medicine to deal with soil health. To deal with human health, sorry. And we don't need a dirt doctor telling us our job. During the Green Revolution of the 60s and the 50s and 60s, he became a pariah in the industry where agronomists recommended, because they derived the largest part of their income by selling as much NP and K out of a bag as they could. And the legacy of this approach is now the many millions of acres around the world which are minerally depleted, mined out, biologically dead soils. But I think the most disturbing, I think the most disturbing find from all of Albrecht's work for Western society has got to be the one-liner that became his catch cry. The outcome of his life's work derived to a sentence, and it's this: healthy soil, healthy plant, healthy animal, healthy human. That healthy soil grows a healthy plant, and the beneficiaries of that healthy system are the animals and people that eat the plants, and which in and of that system are also healthy. That fundamentally there's this direct correlation between the health of soils and the health of the population. Healthy soil, healthy plant, healthy animal, healthy human. So if we reverse engineer that finding and look at the health of our population, whether it's obesity epidemic, whether it's record cardiovascular disease, diabetes on the rise, intestinal complaints like celiac and Crohn's also on the rise, and all types of cancer, I can't help but wonder what is happening with the health of our soil. About 5 years ago on our farm, we decided to kick up our soil health to another level. And I say another level because I didn't actually start from a standing start. You see, for the past 30 years, my father, Barry, that's him there, the slightly older version of me, has been an Albrecht practitioner. So he approached crop nutrition with an understanding of raising base calcium and sulphur to combat the negative effects of magnesium and sodium, that minerals are important to your soil, and minor nutrients can cause big problems if they're out of whack, that rising soil carbon will increase soil biology and enhance structure, and that potassium, which is limiting in our soils, is going to be required for every crop or we start mining it. And then maybe if I get all that stuff right, I can get the largest part of my nitrogen and phosphorus from the soil for free. But even after 30 years of soil correction, something was still missing. Disease was still an issue, chemical use was rising, and tractors, which had tripled in size in 20 years, were compacting and destroying the structure in our fragile clay-based soils. But in true farmer style, we're always looking for that silver bullet, that one thing I could spray on my fields and fix all my problems. And we tried every miracle in a bottle, soil amendment and snake oil on the market, ran up a lot of hours on good sprayers, and wasted a lot of money. But that approach was akin to sticking on Band-Aids when what the farm really needed was a heart transplant. Ah, back to those cows. Somebody once said to me that in just 1 hectare of wheat, 1 hectare, there's 40,000 kilometres of roots. Enough to go around the world at least once. And that the weight of bacteria in just 1 hectare of soil is the equivalent to the weight of 5 cows. See, I saw some evidence from New Zealand that it was suggested it was closer to 9 cows. So maybe the cows in New Zealand are a bit smaller, or maybe they were counting sheep. But there we go, 40,000 kilometres and 5 cows. And the true soil health starts when these 40,000 kilometres of plant roots start to interact with these 5 cows, producing things like plant antibiotics, vitamins, digestate, metabolites, and secondary exudates that you simply cannot buy in a bag. I knew that we had to take a look at our entire system. So right now, in the interest of time, and so I don't bore you to death, I'm going to go straight to dessert. These are the things we've implemented on our farm in the interest of soil health. None of them is a silver bullet. None of them is meant to stand on their own, but as part of a wider soil health strategy. Controlled traffic farming. About 10 years ago, a young guy called Ed Windley moved down the road. He'd been working in the cotton fields of Emerald, and he'd witnessed the revolution of that industry through controlled traffic farming. He turned up at Calabar with his big, high horsepower machines on crazy looking skinny tyres, and we all had a bit of a laugh at him. But one thing we all quickly learned was how well our clay-based soils respond to not driving on them. The deoxygenation of soil from compaction assists and harbours disease and creates our own clods that we then try to break down by driving over it again. There's a lot of cost and a lot of time involved in the way we were farming, and a lot of diesel. And I took this photo probably 7 or 8 years ago because that was pretty good soil prep for us. We got a nice depth of fine soil there, but you can see the clods, and that is mechanical compaction that we made ourselves. So that's the way we used to do it, and the way we made those clods was using that sort of a beast to work up the fields. So early in our trialling of CDF principles, our machines went from looking like that to more like that. And after a couple of years of ground truthing in multiple crops, we began to invest in custom CTF systems. Like that. I must say, Of all the things that we've implemented on our farm, CTF has provided the most visual and immediate responses of them all. And the biggest gains, as I see them, are the number and size of our tractors has decreased, along with the associated capital requirement. The passes over our fields from crop to crop has declined from, used to be around 6 to 11 times we'd pass over our fields. That's dropped to now 2 to 3, which has saved us between 1/3 and 2/3 of our diesel per hectare, depending on the crop rotation. It also saves us the carbon loss and the water loss that comes through cultivation. It's also allowed for the introduction of a simple single-pass bed renovation following veggie crops for grain and cover crops, or even direct drill. In 2 to 3 passes, we now get carrot hills to look like this and onion beds to look like that. So it's been a big change for us. The only real losers out of CTF are our tractor operators, who no longer get to do those big crowd-pleasing runs along the side of the Cunningham Highway in a monolithical machine for the pleasure of the operator and the travelling public, and our John Deere dealer, who no longer gets to sell the monolithical machine. Several people this morning have also spoken about skilled labour, and that's been one of the challenges when you put all this stuff in a tractor. You nearly got to send your staff to NASA to learn how to drive a tractor. In fact, I very rarely get to drive a tractor anymore, but sometimes on a Saturday morning when there's no one around, I love to go down and get on a tractor and do recreational tillage, as we call it. But I find myself sitting in the seat going, oh, I've either got to ring somebody up, he's having a day off. How do we get this thing to run? Making compost. Everybody knows Queensland farmers love to stir up a bit of crap, but making your own compost takes it to a whole new level. Bayer, through the Partnering with Innovation Group, bought out Bob Schaefer from America to teach us about making and farming with compost. So inspired by Bob, I came straight home and built a small compost heap at the back of the garage, which promptly blew all over the yard and got me in a lot of trouble with my wife. So we went to a larger pile and we turned it with the loader. It wasn't behind the garage. And after a couple of batches of learning to turn that, which is mushroom waste, into that, we learned a lot about making compost and farming with it. And after 3 years, it's definitely changing our soil. We teamed up with the boys from Greenbelt, seeding microbes into mushroom waste and chicken manure to create a high analysis biofertiliser. The Greenbelt is rich in phosphorus, potassium, calcium, sulphur and all traces, along with a good helping of carbon. We now grow all of our crops on just 2 to 4 tonnes per hectare of Greenbelt, that's per hectare, and we are now on a trajectory of using no additional fertiliser on the farm. As well as that, we make a long-term, more static compost that using green waste from our local tip and our waste onions, which is a more traditional fungal compost. That way do we get to recycle the nutrients from our factory back into our fields. And by the way, we're selling both of these products. The most valuable result from the compost, and less tillage, I believe, has been the reintroduction of fungus to the farm, running like thick strands through the soil. And to be honest, I've never actually seen this on our farm in the past. Third thing is cover crops. In 2015, my son and I visited the farm of Steve Groff, co-founder of Cover Crop Solutions in Pennsylvania. Steve is a no-till purist who hasn't cultivated his fields for 22 years. His philosophy of not destroying the rhizosphere, or that halo of beneficial microbes around plant roots, sees him following the harvester with a drill, sowing cover crops before the winter in Pennsylvania. He also drills cover crops into the inter-row space of growing crops and plants and green plants summer grain into standing covers that are 1 metre tall. There's some incredible new technology in that space, and if you're a YouTube surfer, you can spend many hours looking at that new machinery. So we now use several cover crops and mixes depending on what we want to achieve in the soil. We might use a sorghum for its natural hydrogen cyanide and prussic acid to cleanse out pathogens and to add huge amounts of biomass. We might sow a pea, a lab or a hemp to fix nitrogen. We'll sow millet or, in the winter, barley and rye for their massive roots that boost beneficial microbes. Or we'll mix any of the above. Most importantly, they must fit into the 2 to 3 month seasonal gaps between our crops and help, not hinder, the next crop. So early in the autumn of 2015, I changed my religion and direct drilled sun hemp and tillage radish into an old maize field that had been cut for silage. To my unending amazement, the cover crop not only grew, but it thrived. By the time Bob Schaefer had arrived in May, it was all but done and ready to cut down. And the tillage radish has become one of my favourite cover crops. This is my son John with some of the radishes that we grew in that crop. And if I could get carrots to grow that big and straight by direct drilling into a cornfield, I'd be giddy. The tillage radish not only penetrates and loosens hard soil, but the taproot extends beyond the rooting depth of our crops and recycles the nutrients back up. And the radish, which quickly decomposes, yields that nutrition to the next crop. This is my son Matt, standing in a soil pit that we dug, following those tap and feeder roots. Now, Matt's 6'5", so and he followed those all the way down to the bottom. So that's really cool. So, what's that, honey? No, he's not on his knees. That same autumn, we direct drilled tillage radish into standing bean stubble. It grew for 2 months and we mulched it. We speed tilled it one time with a multi-disc and drilled maize into it in the spring. So that's one working, crop to crop with a cover crop in between. And on just 4 tonne of our homemade green belt and no other fertiliser, that maize stand yielded 80 tonne to the hectare of chop and grew 13 feet high. And to be honest, I've never ever seen a corn crop set cobs over my head. And fourthly, but certainly not leastly, biologicals. Finally got there, Dick. It's okay. The concept of using living organisms to replace chemistry in a farming system is not new. But like most technology, the quality and the practical application of the products now on offer is making growers take a second look. I believe biologicals have the ability to herald a new era of soil health through less reliance on chemicals by promoting good biology, kind of like our IPM strategy for your soil. By the time Bayer introduced us to Denise Manker, the discoverer and maker of Serenade Prime, most of us were looking for answers to Pythium-struck carrot seedlings, sclerosis losses in young beans and the like. Serenade, or Bacillus subtilis, is a symbiotic root coloniser we now apply to the seed row at planting to protect young, vulnerable roots as they elongate. It gives us active protection from diseases like Pythium, Rhizoctonia and Sclerotinia ralsii, building a more resilient and healthy crop right from the start. I reckon products like Serenade will work best as part of a biologically active system, but it probably has the resilience to be a silver bullet in a number of cases. It's interesting though, in the USA, where our counterparts are sowing 20 to 30,000 acres of carrots, they're still applying compost and Serenade to every acre as a first-line defence against soil pathogens. So that's my 4 things. And I guess it's like a 4-legged stool, each one relying on the other to make the whole thing stand up. But I must say that in this system, the relationships are not linear, where 1 + 1 = 2. But I think they multiply or even exponential, so that 1 + 1 = 3 or 6 or 10. But my 4 things are not all that's out there, and you might find some other tools or concepts that you can use to build your soil health. We've been farming veggies on our place for well over 30 years, so turning that ship around won't happen overnight. And we're in our 3rd year of implementation now of these things, of these principles, and our crop yield and quality are now moving. But if I told you that every crop in that interim period was a cracker, I'd be lying. But one thing that cannot be denied is the improvement to the resilience of our crops, their ability to handle stress and still make a crop. It's hard to quantify, but it's very real. I'd like to thank Bayer this morning for the opportunity to talk, and I hope this hasn't sounded like an ad for Bayer, but they have been very proactive in this space, providing a forum for education, collaboration and inspiration that's been a big part of my journey to better soil health. And along with, I must say, the many Aussie growers and collaborators we've had the pleasure of visiting through the PWI group. Can I also acknowledge Horticulture Innovation, who have taken us overseas to expand our thinking, see new technology, the Soil Wealth Project on my farm, which has quantified some of our new practices, and just last month, the Precision Ag Tour to New Zealand, which was another great forum to network with Australia and New Zealand's leading growers in this area. So in conclusion, the next time you walk out into your field and you pick up a handful of dirt, remember those 40,000 kilometres and 5 cows. Consider the tools and concepts you can use to get them working together. You'll do something great for your farm, for your family, for your staff, your customers, and according to Dr. Albrecht, for the nation. Thanks very much.